What is good? What is good? What is good? Welcome back to the Coast to Coast podcast here on Inside Carolina and InsideCarolina.com. I'm your host, simply Joey Powell. With me, as always, hashtag as expected, Sherrell McMillan, West Coast representation from Sean Moran. Coast to Coast is coming at you. Full disclosure, we're recording this moments after the game in Cameron, where your North Carolina Tar Heels eked out a 4-point victory against the loathed Duke Blue Devils. It wasn't a pretty game, but it was North Carolina's highest offensive output of the year. We will get to that in just 1 second. Before we get rolling, you guys know how this goes. I need you to stop, look around, rate, review, give us the feedback that we need. All right. Your ratings and reviews help the Inside Carolina podcast go to the top of the podcast network's algorithm. And that would be a huge help for us. So give us a rating, give us a review. We'd love a 5-star review. If we are not worthy of a 5-star review, tell me why and let us fix it and let us provide more. What was the line from the old Wayans? Was it Wayans Brothers skit? Mo Better Blues? Or was it Mo Better? We want to give you Mo Better content. All right. And how's that for a 90s throwback? So yeah, rate us, review us. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you're not a premium Inside Carolina subscriber, go ahead and make that change. There's all kinds of deals being hooked up for that. Speaking of deals, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to our friends over at Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com. Hit them up for the gear. I have a little Nike swoosh on my shirt. You might recognize it. Rail has a Jumpman. All of these things can be procured, or these brands can be procured from Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com. They're big fans of Inside Carolina. They're loyal supporters of our content and the work that we do to get you this content. We want you guys to support them as well. Locally owned, locally operated. You can't beat their prices. You can't beat their selection. You can't beat them, period. And with that, let's get into the show. Boys, how you feeling? Sean, how's the left coast?
Much better after pulling out after pulling out the win, which was getting dicey at times.
Closer than it needed to be. We'll talk about that in a sec. Rel, how you feeling?
I'm inside, Joey.
He
So
is
I'm
inside. I
more
know there's
comfortable.
drapery. There's like
Yeah,
indoor
there's
plantage.
flowers.
That's
Yeah,
impressive.
feeling good.
Uh, Boys, before we get off to the game of the evening, let's give our folks what they come here for, and that's some recruiting news around the North Carolina basketball program. I'm going to play a little word association, mainly 2 words. It's going to make a name. Sherrell, I want you to give a profile. Sean, tell me what you've seen from him. Isaac Traudt. Go Rel.
So yeah, he is a 6'9" forward from Grand Island, Nebraska. So
Wait a
twice
minute. Wait a minute.
in
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'm sorry to step on you, but they play basketball in Nebraska.
Yes. So they play basketball in
All
Nebraska.
right.
There's evidently a town called Grand Island, which Nebraska couldn't be further from any coast. But that's where Isaac is from. And it's kind of ironic because Hunter Salas also is from Nebraska. So North Carolina has gone basically the entire history of the program without recruiting anyone from Nebraska. And here we are in back-to-back classes where Traudt doesn't have an offer from UNC yet, but he's getting heavy interest. And that's coming mostly from UNC assistant Brad Frederick, who he's been in contact with. Kind of a prototypical, I would say, stretch forward. I'll let Sean get more into that. But that's what he slots as. Pretty good shooter by all accounts. I know Eric Bossi likes him a lot. He just is one of those kids where he plays in he lives in such an isolated place that he just hasn't, or before the last couple of months, he hadn't gotten the national attention that he probably deserved for his play. He also didn't play on any, the big three AAU circuits last year. So I think between finally getting his name out there, between people seeing a lot of film and not having anything else to do the last year when it comes to recruiting off campus, he's starting to get a lot of attention, and he's got a lot of big offers from big time schools.
Awesome. And Sean, I know you had a chance to watch at least 3 quarters of Mr. Traudt recently. What can you tell us about him, his style of play, how he would potentially fit into a North Carolina offense, things that you like about him just from a watching perspective?
Yeah, I was able to watch his Friday night game. At first, I had to do a double take because as I was watching, there were fans in the stands, there were student sections. It wasn't packed, but it actually reminded me a little bit of a year ago in terms of some of the games you were watching. So Traudt finished with 23 points in the game. They kind of gave up a run in the fourth quarter and lost, but overall, as Sherrell mentioned, 6'8", 6'9". He was playing almost point forward in the game where he had he's a right-handed player, but was pretty strong with his left hand. So was often taking the ball up the court. But when he didn't have the ball in his hands, he was in the post. And, he was playing a team that was full of, 6 foot to 6'3" guys. And coming off rewatching the Clemson game, there's a lot of similarities with how they're trying to be physical with him in the post, double teaming him almost anytime he touched the ball. But very skilled player, comfortable in the post, but a good shooter. Was knocking down his free throws, hit a three. Not the most athletic guy right now, but I think, in terms of really how the recruiting world is going to work, is you need to land these 30 to 50 type guys that are not going to be potentially one and done or G League material. And I think he fits that. I know reading the 24/7 site from the UVA one, they had, Tony Bennett had compared him to Joey Hauser. I think from a shooting perspective that fits, but he had a lot more kind of off the dribble game than Hauser does even right now. He turned the corner a few times off the pick and roll going right, and once he turned the corner, he was pretty hard to guard with his size. And one other thing, good length. So I liked him. Didn't love him, but I think going forward, you're not going to love a lot of the guys because they're not going to just, anybody that you love is probably going to be, one and done or G. Yeah. So I think he was good. He was solid. He was skilled, and he would be an option where he can space the floor, which I know has been a point of contention for UNC this year. So it'll be interesting to see how the recruitment plays out. Once again, it wasn't the highest level of competition, so will be interesting to see how he continues to progress. But just from a skill set, I liked him.
And so the other player, they've already offered a player kind of in that we call it hybrid forward spot, kind of that someone who can face up as a four, but also play with their back to the basket a little bit. And that's Deontay Green, who is from Asheville.
Mhm.
I think right now Traudt is probably more of a complete player than Green. But North Carolina obviously Asheville's much closer than Grand Island, Nebraska, to Chapel Hill. So I'm sure that plays into Carolina's favor. And we don't really quite have any information just yet on whether or not it's a situation where they're only looking to take one hybrid forward. I would think that considering the players that they could lose over the next year or two, that they would just welcome anyone who can shoot and score, who has good size, regardless of position. So we'll see how that kind of plays itself out moving forward.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys giving us the scoop on one Isaac Traudt, especially in this time of weird recruiting. That could be a fishy situation. Boom. See what I did there? Yeah, we're after
Y'all,
him, guys.
if y'all aren't watching this on YouTube, Joey's feeling good. Everybody,
Hey, look,
just to let you know, he's feeling good.
It's been a good night. I've got a big sports weekend ahead of time. You got City v Liverpool tomorrow. And then my Bucks are in the Super Bowl. Oh, and by the way, the Tar Heels just beat Duke. So this is a good night. And yes, those of you who are watching on YouTube, you already know that. Also, we've got some guys in North Carolina who are actually back to playing, of note to Tar Heel fans. It sounds like DeMarco Dunn is starting to heat up from the perimeter. Insert your NBA Jam, audio there. But Sean, sounds like Mr. Dunn is starting to find his home outside the 3-point line.
Yeah, so we went pretty in depth with him last week. He's had 2 games since, both wins for the team. But just looking at his season stats in total, I think they've played 8 or 9 games, and he's at 40% from the 3-point line. And that was even after he had one game, might have been 1 for 9. I can't remember exactly, but he was pretty poor in one game and is still at 40%. He's at 70% from the line. You'd like to see that get up a little bit. He had one game where he was 13 of 16, which kind of is the reason he's up there, and then some 2 for 4 type of performances. So you'd like to see that number come up, but I think he's averaging around 25, rebounding the ball very well. And once again, we know 40% in high school doesn't translate to 40% at UNC, but at the same time, I think it's room to be optimistic, similar to what we talked about last week with how he can help the team next year.
Absolutely. And we've mentioned many times on this podcast earlier this year, you can't have enough scorers in college basketball, and UNC needs all of the guys that can throw it in from deep that they can find. And Sherrell, you also wanted to add something about Mr. Dontrez Styles, who's returning to form.
Yeah, so I think we talked about him a little bit either on Inside Carolina Live, which you should be listening to, WCHL on Saturdays at 10 a.m. So I think we talked about it a little bit then, but he came back last Friday, and he's actually already played 4 games since coming back from his concussion, and he's acquitted himself well by all accounts. We've talked to his head coach Perry Tyndall at Kinston, and he's just said he's impressed with how much energy he's playing with, and he's just kind of doing what Don Torres style does, which is, he scores at a decent rate, he rebounds, he plays good defense. So just happy to see him from a Carolina perspective back on the court playing well. And he said, we talked to him last weekend, and he said after that first game, he had a little bit of butterflies, in warm-ups, but once he got on the court, everything was fine. So pretty remarkable turnaround from, being taken out of the gym, on a stretcher and being unconscious for a minute on January 8th to, playing again in games on January 29th and now into February. So happy for him. And he's trying to lead Kinston to yet another state championship.
Absolutely. And you never want to see a kid get injured. You always want to see a kid get the most out of their high school career. And it's great that it was not a worse injury than it was, because as you alluded to, when it first happened, it did not look good. Like it looked just absolutely horrendous. So we're glad to hear that he's healthy. Going to take a quick break, hit an ad for Johnny T-shirt, and then the national guys will jump in right behind us. And we're going to talk about the game that just finished. I mentioned Johnny T-shirt earlier, Johnny T-shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Supporters of this pod, supporters of Inside Carolina, supporters of the Chapel Hill community. What does that all mean? That means the onus is on y'all, viewers and listeners, to support them. Hit up johnnytshirt.com. Sherrell, I know, has a regular package coming from johnnytshirt.com. He's pretty much in the catalog before the catalog is refreshed. Guy gets tons of gear there. Sean, I don't know if you are as much of a Johnny T-shirt shopper, but you could be, because they do ship to California. I want to let our listeners and viewers know
they do, and I've ordered a few things from them to California, but obviously need to do a little bit more.
Folks, if Sean Moran can order from Johnny T-shirt way out on the left coast, you can do it too. Hit him up, Johnny T-shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Make sure, if you are a premium subscriber, to use that extra 10% that you get from being a premium subscriber. Johnny T-shirt's going to take care of you. We appreciate them taking care of us. And now we're going to kick it to the national guys to run some ads to help pay for this content. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. We appreciate you sticking around with us. Joey Powell with Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran on the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. We're glad you're with us. Full confession, we mentioned it earlier in the show, but if you somehow missed that, we're recording this right after the Duke Carolina game just wrapped, probably 35 minutes ago. We heard Coach Williams' post-game comments before we got on here to start recording tonight. Guys, for a long time there, I thought that game was going to follow the traditional UNC at Cameron script, in which Carolina leads a good portion of the game. They're up between 6 and 12, and then around that 8 to 4 minute timeout mark, they start to fade, and Duke ends up winning by 5 or 6. It started to feel that way. It didn't. I know this is not the Duke team of old. This is also not a North Carolina team of old. But Sean, I'll go to you first. How are they able to hang on to get this win against the Blue Devils?
Big shout out to Wendell Moore for the travel at the end.
He owed the Tar Heels one after last year.
Yeah, it was a game. Even at halftime, you felt UNC had controlled the game, but only up, 2 points at the half, in large part due to that 14-2 run and really more a scoreless streak that they had in the first half. And then, they started out the second half playing as well as can be, and kind of gave that up with, their lineup after that 12-minute mark. And then you're just kind of waiting for Duke to take control. And there are definitely opportunities, but UNC kept getting big baskets. Caleb Love had the best game of his UNC career. They hit some big free throws at the end, Armando, and even though Leaky missed that first one, he finished up knocking them in. So once again, it's not the typical Duke team this year, but they were still number 29 in KenPom coming into this game, and it was on the road, some talented players. So it was definitely nice to get that win. And I know last week I was kind of hitting on, I would like to see them go 2-1 out of the next 3. It would have been bad kind of going 0-2 into that Miami game. So at least having that shot at 2-1, I think is still still a good sign.
Absolutely. And I think the way that they did not cave down the stretch as many expected them to, and I felt that way at some point during the game too. Sherrell, our man Sean mentioned Caleb Love's night. Uh, do you want to start talking about Caleb? I know Roy hit us with a vintage Royism in the post game where he said, "I don't care if he's got 5 stars or 3 moons. I still want him to play his best." I think we saw what Caleb is capable of tonight. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we'll talk about Caleb, but I'm going to take us in a different direction if that's okay.
Sure.
So I'm looking at the box score, and I just I've gone to 3 different sites. First, I went to ESPN, and then I went to Yahoo, and then I was like, let me check the UNC one before I say this out loud to make sure it's 100% correct. But Dayron Sharp, Leaky Black, and Kerwin Walton, a combined 13 of 13 from the field. I mean, that is
Dayron didn't miss
my
a shot.
that's what they have him listed as. I really thought that he got fouled or something, but they have him listed at 5 for 5. They have Walton at 4 for 4, and they have Leaky at 4 for 4. So to me, that's Caleb was phenomenal, and we can talk about him for sure. But I just saw that and that jumped out at me. Those 3 guys, each one at times maligned in their own ways, I think, this season, coming through. Walton was huge with those threes, kind of kept Carolina going. When the lead would get down to 3 or 4, we pushed it back up to 7. Sharp had a ton of energy, just finishing some of the missed baskets. He made a free throw or 2, I believe, which is, for
He
him,
did make one,
that,
yes.
that's great. And then Leaky, we've talked about if Leaky can give you 7 or 8 points, you're usually feeling pretty good about your chances in a game. So that just jumped at me. So sorry for taking it that way. As far as Caleb, man, you saw that was the player that we thought we would see. Maybe
Yeah.
not every single game, but that is what his ceiling or close to his ceiling looks like, is when he's going downhill. And Sean, I'll let you talk about why he was able to do that. But when he's going downhill toward the rim and not fading, and not taking step backs or anything like that, just going straight to the rim. He's tough, man. He's strong. He's big. He's got long arms. He's athletic. All those things. And I think Jay Billis kind of nailed it on the telecast. He got a couple of ones near the basket early, and it seemed like everything just opened up. You could see a moment, I think, in the game where he was like, "I don't think Jeremy Roach or DJ Stewart can guard me." No, I mean, seriously, like
No, I remember seeing that exact point.
yeah,
That's why
it
I'm
was like
laughing.
it was like a light bulb went off, and he just started driving to the rim. And once he did that, and he hit a couple shots, then Duke had to honor him, driving and on the perimeter, and that opened things up for everybody else. That's why he had 7 assists. Now he had 5 turnovers, 2 of which in those last couple of minutes were really, really rough.
Yeah.
But those 7 assists, I think, show kind of the floor game he's capable of when the spacing is good, when you're going against a team like Duke who plays that kind of pressure defense. It was his type of game. Let's put it that way. And that 3, man, when it was 83-79, and the
Dagger.
way the ball moved, and what's even to me, and if I'm wrong, correct me. We're going, right after the game. The ball swung from, I think it was Leaky in the corner over to Caleb on the left wing, and I believe Kerwin Walton was the next pass over, wide open. So if you're gonna pass up Kerwin Walton wide open, you
You
better
better
make
hit
the
it.
shot. And he did. So, credit to him.
That's the second time that he's had a big shot like that in the dwindling moments of a game from the exact same spot on the
Left
floor.
wing.
And
Mhm.
yep, and again, we've talked about here how his proclivity to go left and how much better he is on his left side. But I think the biggest thing tonight too was when he took those threes, they were in rhythm, they were confident. Look, I know a lot of people may hate me for saying this, but I love seeing him talk some trash out there because it means he's getting his confidence. And I think that means a lot for this team to feel like to feel like Caleb Love is kind of getting into his space and feeling like he's the player that everyone saw prior to him getting to Chapel Hill. Sean, anything else you want to add about Caleb Love's performance, or do we want to get into some other stats and things that jumped out at us about the game?
No, I think we can stay on Caleb for a minute just because, it has been a difficult season for him with some ups and downs. But, Sherrell, I mean, I think there's a few reasons. One, just the Duke defense. I think, before the game, I haven't bet on a UNC over all year. And that, I was pretty confident in that. And I was also looking for any Caleb Love props I could find because, similar to Cole Anthony having around 24 points and getting to the rim last year, which he hadn't really done all season. With Duke, they're gonna pressure you well above the 3-point line. for the most part, they're not great defenders, so it makes it easier to get by them just off the dribble. They have no shot blocking presence, and unlike Clemson, when UNC would set a pick, you could actually use that pick, and you're either getting isolated on the big, or you get a step on the guard versus having to pass the ball when Clemson would trap you or force you to get rid of it. And for Caleb, a lot of it you see the confidence when he got that and one dunk at the beginning. Once again, he kind of let the scream out, and I think he realized, hey, I'm just going against these guys from AAU that I know I can play against. And then the other was when he took it against Roach. He probably got fouled, but he went strong with it instead of settling for a floater or trying to fall back, which he's done a lot. And he just went strong with it. And I think he realized, and it got him into rhythm. He started playing harder on defense. And when he was not in there in the second half, at least I was, I wanted him playing that whole 20. He probably wouldn't have been able to sustain, but I think he played very well. Once again, I think in part of it is due to the Duke style of pressing up on you, so it does make it easier for the guards to penetrate and get some space. But hopefully that can give him confidence. But once again, a completely different style of play than Clemson. I think it came at a much needed time in terms of bounce back.
Yeah, and he definitely did tonight. The things he did well were things that are in his wheelhouse. They were taking the ball to the basket. I mean, he had a couple of really just good attacks where he was finding perfect angles with which to attack the basket. And I hope he can carry that for the rest of the season, because I think it means great things, again, not just for him, but for the rest of the team. Sherrell mentioned the shooting percentages of Sharp and Leaky Black and Kerwin Walton earlier. I also want to kind of take a different take on those stats. You had 6 players in double figures, which was big. And when you score 90 plus points, that's going to happen. The team hit 10 threes, which is just a giant middle finger to Sean's 6 threes a game, parable from earlier in the year. They did end up winning the rebound game after being down by 2 at the half. I think the big thing, though, was that they got points out of their starting backcourt. They got 8 for 9 from beyond the arc from Walton and from Caleb Love, and we've talked about it ad nauseum here as to how much that will help the spacing and will help the big guys work. And I think you saw that a little bit in the second half. Once Duke realized that it wasn't just Kerwin Walton that they had to jump out on, it just made things so much better, at least from a spacing perspective for the bigs. Sherrell, am I wrong on that, or is that something they could probably build off of? Or kind of to Sean's point, is that more of a byproduct of just how Duke likes to play defense?
I think it's partly both. Again, I always say both.
Little column A, little column B.
Right, little column A, little column B, because Duke just wasn't. We said it entering the game. Duke just wasn't equipped to handle those UNC bigs, and really, the only chance they had was to disrupt the backcourt so they can't get the ball to the bigs and create turnovers. But once Caleb started turning the corner, and any of the guards really started turning the corner, there's not much Duke could do because of the size discrepancy. Like, I think there were a couple of lobs that UNC missed, but getting the ball on the rim, the bigs pass well as between each other as well. So once the guards kind of got past that initial line of defense, there wasn't a ton that Duke was going to be able to do to stop UNC. They started Mark Williams, and he's going to be a good player for them, I think, defensively, but just size wise, he just wasn't ready for Baycott, for Brooks, and for Sharp. So I think it's something they can build on. I think Caleb now sees, like, okay, get to the rim and good things happen. But it's going to be easier said than done when you play a team that has a much different defensive philosophy, which the book on Carolina still, even after this great performance and great shooting and 10 threes, is going to be pack the paint and make them beat you from 3. And they've proven this year that sometimes they can't do that. But tonight, they shot well and they looked like a confident team, and that's why they got the win.
Sean, 1.2 points per possession from Ken Pom. That's got to be a record for the season, right?
Yeah, that is their highest, especially after coming off Clemson. I think it was 0.79, which was their lowest.
God,
just looking.
I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was that bad until you just mentioned it. Now I need to go vomit.
But I mean, they had 6 guys over 100 offensive rating. Caleb had his first MVP in terms of what Ken Pom designates. So yeah, I mean that is that is a thing of beauty. Once again, I think part of it is that Duke defense versus Clemson UVA, and just going to Clemson for a minute. I mean, Clemson tried to be very physical, which worked out, versus Duke, that is more of a finesse team. But in terms of what Sherrell was mentioning, Kerwin Walton, once again, no Cameron crazies or anything, but he stepped in just right off the bat, making threes, and continue that in the second half. Leaky was hitting his pull ups, and Dayron, who I kind of getting a little mad about when it seems like he's always moving a little too fast, for his body at times, but when they had that lineup in there after the 12-minute mark, that was giving me heartache. He had several huge tip-ins to kind of keep that lead, at least kind of continuing the lead instead of letting it all relinquish during that time. So, once again, a very complete effort. And Garrison Brooks, I thought he played very well from the opening. I think, from a passing perspective, he's probably the best big passer, once he catches it in the post, in terms of finding guards. And I thought he made, especially in the first half when he was dribbling down the court, and could have tried to take it and throw up something awful on the break, and instead, he made a great decision. So, overall, there's a lot of positives.
Yeah, and I just two things that again, just perusing the box score that catch my eye: 50 points against Clemson, 50 points in the second
In the
half
half.
in the half against Duke. So that was one, and then Kerwin Walton's offensive rating, 197. Which, I mean, he didn't qualify for MVP because he wasn't involved in enough possessions, but that is absurd.
That's stupid.
Yeah,
That's
absurd.
that's a dumb
Yeah,
number.
yeah.
But again, I think there's something to be said for the kid figuring out where his lane is, right?
Oh, for sure. And not to get too forward thinking or anything, but if he stays like in school for 3 or 4 years, Marcus Page's record of 299 threes, career threes at Carolina, is gone. I mean, it's going to vanish because this dude, I mean, he's got the size too, but that's, I think, sometimes hurt, shooters like Marcus Page. And it just looks so effortless, and he's so calm, and there's no wasted motion. It's like he doesn't move. He just jumps and the
Yeah.
ball goes in. So, I mean, can you imagine this team if North Carolina wasn't able to sign him back in April? And then
I'd
there was
rather
the
not.
whole weekend we were wondering if he was going to go to Minnesota, if he was going to come to Carolina, and the announcement was this day, and then it got pushed back. And it just goes to show that those, spring signees sometimes are a godsend. I mean, for North Carolina, he has completely changed the trajectory of the team because he gave them the one thing that they didn't have, which was competent, consistent outside shooting.
Well, and he takes the pressure off of the other guys that play that position too. The beauty in Walton, and I love your forward thinking here. We will totally allow that on the Coast to Coast podcast, but think about how good he's going to be when he can earn more playing time, right? Like when he gets to a point where the coaches trust him to be out there 30 minutes a game. Then all of a sudden, how does his offensive production go up then? I don't know, Sean. Anything you want to throw in about Kerwin Walton?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the beginning of the season, my philosophy was between him and Puff, hopefully one will emerge. Definitely didn't see it to this extent. Also I thought, Kerwin's kind of lack of quickness on D would hinder him. But here you are watching this game, and Duke has all the 5-star, 4-star freshmen. UNC has a lot, and here it is, Kerwin Walton. Obviously Love played well, but Kerwin Walton is the guy that's hitting the shots. And you have DJ Stewart, who played well, but once again, you're talking about a ranking difference of 70, 80 between the two. And to get that type of production out of Kerwin has been huge, just the whole season.
And shockingly, I think it was what I saw during this game too. Kerwin's, I guess his lapses on defense were due to bad rotation. They weren't bad on the ball defense. I felt like for the most part he was in decent position and was moving his feet well against Duke's perimeter players. Sherrell?
I was going to switch a little bit again. I'm herky jerky here, but
Captain
I wanted to go back.
Contrarian tonight, aren't you?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to Caleb a little bit because I think after the Kentucky game, we talked about how sometimes seeing things that are familiar can help you.
Mm.
And to that point, Kentucky probably was his best game, to that point. And, he was going against guys like Devin Askew that he saw in AAU at CP3 camp, that he's saw at USA. And that was the same thing tonight. I mean, him and DJ Stewart played, I think, high school basketball against each other at their high schools each of the last, I think, 2 years. And then, of course, all those guys, Roach, Stewart, Hurt, played against each other on AAU. So just seeing familiar faces and knowing, oh, I put 25 on that guy 2 years ago, or, oh, my team, we beat them in this shootout in Arkansas last January, whatever it may be. I think that helps him, that familiarity and knowing that you've had success against that team or that player. So I think that was part of the confidence too, is just, he's like, oh, I've seen these guys before. This is nothing new. It's Carolina Duke, sure, but it's just going up against DJ and Jeremy.
It is a bit of a safety blanket. I could see where that would be a security blanket, not a safety blanket. Maybe a safety blanket's good too. But I could see where that would be a positive for a freshman looking for anything. All right, guys. Anything else we want to talk about on the Duke game before we move on to Miami? Because that's coming up in just less than 48 hours from now.
Well, did the Clemson game not happen, since we haven't
No,
talked about it? We're okay. Okay, it didn't happen.
y'all
Okay,
mentioned it enough.
okay, all right.
Tommy and Brooker did a post game. We mentioned it today on Inside Carolina Live. I don't know how much trash we need to talk about because that game was absolute, just dumpster fire, wrapped in a disgusting wet diaper. So,
What game?
moving on to Miami Monday night. Do we feel like, having seen Miami once, are we hoping that the Tar Heels, or do we feel comfortable that the Tar Heels can do enough to get ahead and win that game, or should we still be worried? Because Miami had a great game against Duke last week, and they took Virginia Tech to the wire today in overtime and lost on a really really tough shot. Sean, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, you still definitely have to be worried. Especially, it was a pretty lucky win on the road against Miami the first time around. Miami, they did have the Duke win, just had a brutal loss to Virginia Tech that really should have been another win. So we could have been talking to them. Miami coming in on a streak. I think they have Cam McGusty back, who didn't play the first time. Wong has been playing great. And once again, for the UNC Duke game, a turnover is not as it's less. There's less importance in the UNC Duke game, just with the possessions and Duke being a little loose with the ball as well, compared to really Miami, where it's going to be slow. Definitely Virginia next Saturday,
Okay.
where they don't turn the ball over and they use all. There's the slowest tempo team in the country. So once again, hopefully they can focus, because the Duke win was still a big one, and kind of try to continue that on, because Jim Larinaga and Miami could easily beat them, despite being one of the worst teams in the ACC. But they do have a few players, and UNC is going to have to focus and kind of get the ball into the bigs and focus on the turnovers.
This Miami team is quite curious. I do think they have some talent, but they have been running with, like a lot of other rosters in the ACC, they've been running with a bit of a whittled down roster. I know they dismissed one player since the last time the Tar Heels played them. Sherrell, why should UNC still be worried about Miami? Is it just because of Isaiah Wong? Sean mentioned him. Is there something here that UNC may be able to fall back on, maybe that they took out of the first game?
So Matt Cross was the player who was dismissed from Miami, and I think
Yes,
he
thank you.
started and he played almost 30 minutes.
He hit a couple of threes
Um,
against Carolina the first time
yeah,
too.
yeah. So that, I mean, that's not insignificant. But I think, when you start looking at what happened in that first game, obviously that was kind of a fluky win for UNC. Let's put it that way.
Whoa, 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 whoa,
Um,
whoa, whoa! You're not going to sit here and tell our listeners in the good universe of InsideCarolina.com that an Andrew Playtech baseline runner with 2 seconds left on the clock was fluky. I will not stand for that, sir. But please carry on.
Fair enough. And so then, they had 20 turnovers, which was awful. And I mean, that first half was some of the worst basketball, alongside that first half against Clemson that they played all season. And then you had Love, was 1 for 9. It was a big three that he hit, but it was 1 for 9. So, Miami does things to UNC. Schematically, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it always seems like it's a slog when UNC plays Miami. And, Carolina fans they need to be careful, because it wasn't just 3 days ago that
Yes.
everybody was talking about the end of the Roy Williams era and this team is terrible because they put up 50 points against
Fire
Clemson.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, and a win against Duke is great, but it was only a 4-point win, so it's not like they blew them out of the water or anything. And just same thing we've said this entire season, UNC's margin for error is basically 0.0001. And if they come out and they have sloppy turnovers, or they don't shoot well, or they continue to be abysmal from the free throw line, they could easily lose to Miami. It's not a stretch at all. This ACC season, there are a couple of good teams, and then there are a bunch of other guys, and anyone can win basically 3 through whatever.
Yep.
So I would say the Miami game takes on a different significance because they beat Duke, because just like they've grabbed back the goodwill that they lost after the Clemson loss, they can erase everything if
Don't
they
lose at
lose.
home to Miami.
Yeah, if you lose at home to Miami. So you have to validate the Duke win by going out and beat Miami and getting to Sean's 2-1 through this
Yeah,
3 game.
we mentioned that on our radio show today with Tommy Ashley too, that this margin for error is the equivalent of a butt hair off of a rat, right? Like it's that slim. And this team proved that tonight against Duke. And I think, to your point, you just got to want every little thing. You've got to impose your will, like we didn't see in the game that shall not be mentioned last Tuesday. Boys, anything else you want to throw out about Miami before we put a bow on this one and head out for the evening? Sean, you got 2 pennies for me?
Sure. I think I will go back to the Clemson game just for a second, just because one, I think it'll help them prepare for UVA on Saturday. So the next pod will be after that game. I think that's predicted in terms of probably the largest spread UNC will be underdog in going forward. But once again, with Clemson, they got a few offensive rebounds and they really just killed the clock. So it was a very limited possession game. They played physical, and with UNC, they're gonna against UVA in terms of watching the turnovers. But I think they could surprise some people. We'll see. But for the Clemson game, there's a few possessions when they're making that run in the second half where they were playing really 4 out and 1 in, which they did a few times during Duke. And I did enjoy watching that, even with kind of the 2 bigs playing. I thought they were able to execute the 4 out pretty well, and it did open up some space. So hopefully can kind of see that a little bit more going forward, especially when they do have those size mismatches. But once again, it was a big win for Duke against Duke, and will be a very interesting week going forward with the Miami game, where it's going to be their biggest. They're going to the margin is their biggest favorite in terms of what they'll be, probably 8-9 point spread, and then later in the week the biggest underdog. So got to keep winning.
And talking about Virginia, we won't do a show before that Virginia game. Virginia has shown in their last 2 games that they are quite okay going 8 and 9 minutes without scoring offense. It's just it goes back to my adage of nobody's any good. Sherrell, anything else you want to say about Miami before we put this in the bed?
Not particularly, just validate the win, but 2 of 3 at Cameron and 3 of 6 for UNC. So all is not lost.
All is not lost, and even in some bad basketball, that stat should make a lot of Tar Heel fans feel really good, and hopefully will, as you like to use the framing of goodwill, hopefully that'll get them some goodwill as they continue to trek on down the road, because the schedule is getting harder. That Virginia game is going to be tough, winnable, but tough. Just hope they can continue to build on this momentum. Boys, as always, I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you joining us after the game. Appreciate you bringing the perspective and knowledge and hashtag analysis that you always bring. I know our listeners and our viewers appreciate it, and the InsideCarolina.com universe of subscribers appreciates it. Thank you, boys. I'm Joey Powell for Sherrell McMillan, for Sean Moran, for John Siegley, who produces this show. We want to thank him. Big shout out to our friends over at Johnny T-Shirt. This has been the Coast to Coast Podcast. We will catch you next time here on InsideCarolina.com. Late.